Hey everyone, it's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook, and I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hey everyone, welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. My guest today is licensed clinical social worker Anne Russo. As the founder and director of AMR Therapy, Anne is a mental health advocate, educator, and thought leader specializing in addressing complex and often stigmatized topics such as religious trauma, sexual empowerment, ethical non-monogamy, queer identity, and inclusivity in mental health. Anne knows that understanding the impact of religious trauma on identity, relationships, and mental health is essential to healing religious trauma. To that end, she has developed what she calls the Religious Trauma Treatment Model, or RTTM, to help clients heal from the lasting impact of religious trauma and shame around their sexuality or navigate any societal stigma related to queer identity or non-traditional relationships. Wow, it sounds like you're doing some great work. Welcome, Anne.
Hi, thank you, Janice. I'm so happy to be here today.
And you're joining us from New York, and I'm in British Columbia, and our countries are having a bit of a moment right now.
They
but
are.
I'm really pleased to keep maintaining strong and friendly ties with our dear American neighbors. You guys are so important to us, and I know that we are also important to you folks. So thanks again for joining me.
Yes, of course. And as I'm sure you know, there's differing views here in the United States as well about how things are proceeding. So
yeah, it's
yeah.
tricky. I mean, like I say, our countries are having a moment, but we come from a strong background of friendship, and I'm sure that we'll get back to those. For now, I'm wondering, would you tell us a little bit about your own growing up and what role religion played in your life, if any?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a non-religious queer household. I come from a Catholic background in my family tradition, but I wasn't really raised in the faith. And what I understood about religion generally was that people that were religious were against my family. So that was my understanding growing up. And I would see it in, back in the days of Oprah and Donahue and Maury. And one of the things I was so curious about, though, is why. Like, I did not get it. I didn't understand the context at all. So when I was 18, I actually decided to join a fundamentalist Christian church.
Wow.
And I was out as a queer person myself at that point. And I don't know, I had some gumption, I guess, but I was just super curious, So I did join this church, and I was a member of that church for a few years. And while I was at that church, I even went on a missions trip. I was out in my church still, like I said. I did speeches. I even went to an ex-gay conference while I was there. Not
Wow.
because I wanted to be ex-gay, but because I wanted to understand. Like, I knew that one day I would want to work with, help support folks that came out of this environment, but I needed to understand what the environment was and what I could take from the environment.
And so did you, during that time, did you come to, believe some of the beliefs, around Jesus and the Bible and all that kind of stuff, even if you didn't buy into quite the fundamentalist deal about, homosexuality is bad and all these other things?
It was a very tricky journey. I read the Bible a lot. It didn't really make sense to me so much, but I knew that I felt a pull towards some kind of spirituality. So I went and got my bachelor's degree with a focus on Southeast Asian religion. And then I went on to get my master's in theology. But the whole time I was searching for an answer of what does all this mean. Where one day I thought, one day I'll get it. This will become clear. And it wasn't until after all of that studying that one day, and still no answers, right? Like I felt like I had clear answers as to what wasn't, but not necessarily to what was.
Mhm.
So I decided that, all right, if there is a creator God of some kind, and this is how I was created to be, and this doesn't make sense to me, then I'm going to trust that my journey doesn't end here. So I'm very comfortable with, I have no idea, but I'm very open. And I don't think we can argue with people's faith per se, but I think that we can understand things at a deeper level. And I think we can understand history and culture, and all of that informs my spirituality for sure. But for the answer, no, ma'am, don't have it.
Well, what did your folks think? Were they nervous and thinking, "Oh my gosh, what is happening to our kids?"
Yes. They thought that I had just gone insane, frankly. They didn't understand what I was doing. And I get that, because it was definitely a period of time where I was really trying to understand this. And I didn't know what that was going to look like, So
Wow.
I was really definitely embedded in this church and in this understanding, while still simultaneously holding my queer identity, which was really kind of a strange space to be in.
Yeah. How did they deal with you showing up exactly as you are and not being willing to conform, but still wanting to participate in their community?
So the thing that was pretty interesting about this church was they were really into people coming in that were all kinds of ideas of what they view as sinful, right?
Okay.
So it was kind of this idea of like, hate the sin, not the sinner.
Mhm.
But what was fascinating was so many of the people that were in the church, more of like the higher ups, hadn't really had exposure to gay people. They just had assumptions. So, I mean, I became really good friends with the worship leader, and we would hang out and we would talk about theology. We took a class together. We would always disagree.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed I had really amazing conversations with these folks, and I feel like I was able to understand why they feel the way they feel, even though I don't believe the same way that they do.
Wow, you
Yeah.
present such a powerful example. And I have to say, for myself, even I would find that really, really difficult. And I mean, you were like a young person, college age, making this choice in your mind. I want to find out more about this. I want to learn more about what these people believe, and then potentially be a help to people down the road who have been harmed by some of these beliefs that these people are teaching. I think that's really something that speaks to a lot of inner fortitude, I think, on your part, especially then when your parents are like, "Oh my God, she's gone crazy," and you just kept moving forward, doing what you felt was right for you to do.
Yeah. I felt a strong pull to understand and to support. I always
Yeah.
have. I just didn't know how it would shake out. I thought when I was younger, it would be through politics, ironically. And then my path just completely went a different direction. But I feel really confident that this is the right path.
Beautiful. So then at what point, so you got your master's in theology. At what point did you decide to look into becoming a therapist or a social worker? How did that work?
So I always enjoyed supporting people. I would be the person who would randomly, I'd be at, if I'm at a club or bar, I'd be sitting in the corner giving some kind of counseling session. That just always tended to be my thing.
Mhm.
And I thought for a long time that I would do that through teaching theology and religion. And when it came time to look at getting a PhD and focusing on, like a small piece of theology, teaching a class like that, it didn't speak to me in the same way. And I actually come from a long line of therapists and social workers. And I decided to go that route. And I was like, I'm going to use both of these degrees. I'm going to build something where I can help folks in toxic religious situations, really looking at like queerness and people that really feel marginalized, and helping them reconcile their faith and identity in whatever context that might mean for them. And I've been working at this for a long time, and it's come to, and it continues to come to fruition more and more.
Yeah, well, I have my the small print on my introduction says Anne Russo combines her MA in theology with a passion for social justice to provide transformative training and consulting on sexuality, spirituality, and inclusive care. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing.
Yes, 100%.
Very cool.
I love it.
That's wonderful. That says that you're in the right career field at this point. So now, who is likely to come to you? Do you have is it mainly queer folks who are seeking out your services, or is it people who have come out of some kind of religious background, or it's both?
It's both. At the start of my independent career as a therapist, it was more queer folks.
Mm-hmm.
Non-monogamous folks, and the landscape is changing a bit. I'm getting more folks that are just coming out of religions that have harmed them. And I'm also focusing a lot on consulting and providing trainings for therapists as well. Like, my book is specifically geared towards therapists. It's coming out through PESI, which I'm pretty sure you have in Canada as well. Yeah, they're publishing it. And my goal is to talk about some of the things that we don't get in school. I mean, we don't really talk a lot about spirituality or religion. I didn't have a class on it. Maybe it was a little blurb in a class, but it's such an important part to so many people's lives that I think it needs a little bit more focus.
And what's your book called?
To be determined. They didn't care for my title. I understand. I get it. All good. Don't know yet. But they'll help pick out a good one, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so it's is it exploring the intersection of spirituality and queerness and how therapists can support people?
Actually, it's kind of funny, Janice, because they reached out to me to write a book initially on sexuality. And I was like, awesome. And I sent them my chapter because I'd already been writing a book on this. So I was like, this couldn't be any better. So I sent a chapter that I'd written on Christianity and female sexuality. And they came back and said, will you actually write your whole book on religious trauma?
Whoa.
So, yeah. So I was like, oh, I have this book, but okay. Can this be my second book? But yeah, so this book is specifically geared towards teaching therapists how to work with clients who've experienced religious trauma and shame, and different things to look for, different interventions, and exploring their own biases as well. And I share case studies and a little bit of my personal experiences in there as well to, give it a little extra something.
Yeah, sounds really good. And certainly we know that purity culture slides right in there. It's part of religious trauma for many of us, including myself. And actually, I'm going to put in a shameless promotion here for my own conference that I have in Seattle coming up in May. It's called Shameless Sexuality, Life After Purity Culture. And I have experts coming in from all across the United States who will be addressing this from different angles, and some of them bringing their own experiences into it as well. I feel like now more than ever, with the rise, unfortunately, of kind of Christian supremacy going on in the United States, and Project 2025 really being pushed by the political folks there, we really can't be quiet. It's not a time to shut up. We have to keep talking to people, reminding them they are sovereign, They get to decide what goes on with their bodies and the lives that they want to live and who they are going to love and how they are going to love. Really important topics.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm so happy that you brought that up because I went on your site and I was reading about the conference and it sounds awesome. I really, you'll see me there.
Oh, yay!
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Good. I can't wait.
I love that, and I think those are so important to talk about that. I have so many clients that were just entrenched in purity culture, and also friends, peers.
Mm,
And the damage that it did to them, and the pain and the
yes.
life trajectories that changed because of purity culture.
Yes. Yes. And I know it can be challenging for people to find a therapist that they feel comfortable with who will understand religious trauma because many well meaning religious people become therapists or social workers and they have the best intentions at heart but sometimes if we're still really embracing that belief system it can sure be hard to get around feelings of judgment that can come up, even feelings of concern and fear if they're worried because, oh, if you do that, you'll be offending Jesus or you might go to hell. It's important for potential clients to be able to freely speak with their potential therapist, and say, are you still religious? Are you a secular therapist? I don't want to walk into your office and be bombarded by a cross or Bible verses or even a cross around your neck. Those things can all be really triggering for people.
Yes, yes. I was actually having a conversation this morning about how, because as a child, I knew that, religion, specifically Christianity, as I said, was very anti my family. I love your mug. And so I still experience some of that. Like, even though I joined a church and I did all of these things, if someone tells me they're a Christian upon meeting them, or I see a Bible verse, or I see a cross, like you just said, my initial reaction is I freeze. It's like a
Yeah.
trauma reaction, and I have to, and I know what's going on with me, so I can talk myself through it and out of it. But so many people don't understand, I mean, there's a lot of work done on that. And sometimes I have a friend who's very Christian. And the first time I met her was at a baby shower at her house. And she had all these Christian things. I was scared to death of her and her family, and she's a therapist. And we did a lot of talking. And I told her how I had felt. And she learned that, there has to be a little something more to show that she's safe and affirming. Like, because she is safe and affirming.
Yes.
She's a Christian,
Yes.
but she's has a liberation theology way to her. But how would anybody know that?
Yeah, that's not the first place we go to when we meet someone think of a therapist who is a Christian. We don't necessarily jump to thinking, oh, well, this will be a safe space for me, especially if we've had really difficult and unfortunate interactions already. And definitely, I know some people are able to maintain their religious faith and they are very progressive and they are the ones out there marching to support trans rights and to support their compassionate people who want everyone to be treated equally under the law and to receive compassion. So I definitely understand that these people are out there and I really actually thank them for the support that they are offering. It's very much needed right now.
Yes, it is. And to let us know that you're there on some level, because we don't, like you said, you literally need to wear a sign. Like, I mean, literally, like, no joke. Like, you need to wear a sign because sadly, the initial reaction is going to be one of fear and rejection because that is just what it has been historically. But
And this is, yeah, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, the things are changing. Like you just said, going to a pride parade in Long Beach a couple of years ago, there were so many different churches that were marching in that parade and so many different faith groups and different religious backgrounds and ideologies. And I just was blown away by it. So it's things are changing, but obviously there's still a lot of work to do.
Yes. And for some folks who absolutely would not feel comfortable attending a therapist who holds any religious or spiritual leanings, I do direct people to the Secular Therapy Project. That can be really helpful because then folks know that they won't be receiving any kind of spiritual advice or whatever in the lesson in the session of therapy.
100%. And, I think like you had mentioned this earlier, and I just want to reiterate how when you start, before you even start with a therapist, you have the right to ask the therapist, the coach, the trauma, you have the right to say, tell me about how you practice, what you believe. You have the right to ask these questions. And if it doesn't feel like a good fit for you, you have the right to say, I'm not going to proceed. And if they don't answer the question, you have an absolute right to say that I'm not going to proceed.
Right. Yes. Excellent. And of course, because it's their prerogative whether or not, I mean, if you're going to ask someone, where do you stand on the issue of abortion, that's a pretty personal question. And so a therapist might say, that's too personal, I don't want to talk about it. And you're right, that can be enough of an answer, and we can go searching somewhere else if we don't feel 100% supported or safe with that person.
Yeah. In our practice, we have a lot of folks that ask very specific questions, or they say what they're looking for. We're looking for a queer-friendly liberation theology therapist. Okay, great. Like, that's a great way to do that. Like, what really are you looking for, and putting that out there, and if a person can match that. So if you don't feel comfortable asking some of those deeper personal questions, you can say what you're looking for as you're reaching out.
Right. Yeah. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the RTTM, the religious trauma treatment model that you've developed? I'm really curious.
Yeah, sure. So it was the development by accident. I was, like I
The
was,
best way.
yeah. I mean, because I was thinking, I'm writing a book on religious shame, and I'm like, well, I need to show a religious trauma, and I need to kind of show what I'm doing. And as I'm writing the chapters, I'm thinking, wait a minute, am doing a model of therapy here. Like, I have different interventions I use. I have different evidence-based practices I use. And I'm like, I'm not creating a new therapy. What am I doing here? Right. And I'm like, well, it's a model of how to use the evidence-based therapies to help specifically with religious trauma. So what the main points of this therapy here is, it's very identity focused. So we're looking at we target core wounds left by religious indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
Is spiritually inclusive. It can be exclusive too, if a person chooses not to participate in any kind of spirituality. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important that the therapists have an understanding of spiritual elements and religious elements that the person's coming out of, right? So we can help clients reconcile or redefine their relationship with their spirituality. And it's very empowerment based. So to restore autonomy that often does get lost under those authoritative religious teachings.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that using CBT, ACT, DBT. And
beautiful. Those are all things that I also would incorporate in working with clients. Those three that you just mentioned there. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, because you feel, like you just said, like with your own personal experience, the autonomy and your self-worth just gets ripped to shreds in these systems. Mm-hmm. So even in understanding yourself outside of those systems, the amount of work to just say, how do I feel about this? What do I think about this? And sometimes it can seem so simple for people that haven't been in it, but even deciding where to have dinner can be a difficult a decision to make when you're out of these types of systems.
Oh, yeah. The analysis paralysis that can take hold when we've grown up being terrified because making the wrong decision could mean we end up in eternal torment. And also we don't really typically have the opportunity when we're growing up in fundamentalist homes often to make a lot of decisions. Decisions are made for us. We're not asked our opinion. So there can be a lot of boundary issues. So many of us growing up in those situations, we weren't permitted to have boundaries. And even the version of God that people were kind of beating us over the head with was a very invasive God. You're not even private in your mind. That God is reading your thoughts. There's no safe place. So we can become very disconnected from ourselves, from our own thoughts and desires. We might not even know what it is. We might have to start by going to a thrift store and just looking at a rack and thinking, do I like anything on this rack? What does it feel like? How do I know if I like something? I mean, very, very simple ways to try to reconnect with that part of ourselves.
I mean, I really appreciate what you just said about you're not even have a safe space in your own mind. I just think about that. I have clients obviously that have been in that space, and it takes a while for them to even trust being in their own mind. Yeah. I
Yeah.
just feel a lot of empathy for that space and to move through that space.
Right. And there can be issues around trust. If we get to a point where we recognize the things that we actually were taught by people that we trusted aren't actually the way we thought, because maybe it's mythology, but we were being forced to misinterpret it as literal. And so then we can end up having a real fracture of trust. We no longer trust what was taught to us. We don't trust those people. We don't even trust ourselves. What else am I believing that is not accurate? How could I be this age and just now find out that that thing is not the way that I was taught?
Oh my gosh, and having to work through and that was the thing that I always found challenging about the fundamentalist type of Christianity was the work to make it fit in a world that no longer it could fit into. Like dinosaurs and humans they must have coexisted, or it didn't happen, or there can't be such thing as evolution. And why? But the twisting of information, having to like prove that the earth is only this old, because why? Everything else falls apart for the
Mhm.
belief system, right? So you have to twist it into something.
Yes. Mental pretzel is what I used to
Yeah.
call it. That's what it felt like. And for me, I think it had a lot to do with my identity had become completely enmeshed with my ideology. So any criticism or critique or threat to my beliefs, I internalized immediately as a threat to myself and was very concerned about that. And so I didn't want to tug on that string in case everything would
Yeah.
unravel, and yet there was no getting away from it. That is exactly what happened.
Well, I think of the fear. If you start to unravel it, we're talking about. I mean, to me, I can't think of anything more important than if you come out of that belief system, or you have that belief system, and you're being told you're going to go to hell unless this, and this, or eternal damnation, as you said. I would think you'd want to look into it a little further. But I can see how the cognitive dissonance takes place, and how, especially if you're enmeshed in it when you're a child, that even
Mhm.
the idea of questioning it or
Mhm.
looking outside of it in any way is terrifying.
Oh yeah, and particularly then when your loved ones remain entrenched. And so we speak in terms of coming out as a non-believer, and of course coming out as a person in the queer community. We use the same phraseology for both.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. You're going through the same stages.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and trying to figure out, how much do I divulge or share? Am I safe even to share this with, the people that are closest to me? What do I stand to lose? Is it the right time? What are my motivations? Sometimes it feels like it would just be easier just to keep going along to get along. Don't say anything. I'll compartmentalize my life. So on Sunday dinner with my religious family, I can talk their same talk. The rest of the week, I'm living, as a queer person who doesn't believe those same things. It's hard either way, whether you stay or whether you go. It's going to be challenging.
Yes, I've had clients that tried to compartmentalize similar to what you said, and unfortunately or fortunately, it did not. They couldn't, because of the toll it starts to take on your mental and emotional well-being and to your physical well-being. That being inauthentic in one space is very hard. It's a very hard thing.
Yeah, it's this tug of war between authenticity, like you just said, and acceptance. And until the pressure gets so great that we recognize, I can't stay in this situation. They're only accepting me when I'm inauthentic. And that won't work for me anymore. But it can take quite a while to get to that point, for sure.
But I just imagine too is what that's doing to a person's, your own self-worth and your own authentic identity, when you know that you're being accepted for this inauthentic identity for safety purposes, like you said, many reasons why, but the difficulty of being able to love and honor yourself when people around you may not honor and love those pieces of you, and you don't know, because it's very painful, and I think it's something that people don't fully understand unless they've been through it.
Mm-hmm.
Very hard process of coming out in any way.
Yes. My friend Mike Phillips, he'll be speaking at the Shameless Sexuality Conference, and I've heard him say, repression leads to obsession. And I just think that is spot on, particularly in matters related to sexuality and purity culture. And fundamentalists get so hung up on purity and the idea of your body is not your own. It belongs to a deity out there, and you have to protect it. And boys are in danger of thinking bad thoughts about girls' bodies, but girls are in danger because it's their bodies that are bad. I see you just putting your hand up to your face.
No, because it's
such
so
a mind
toxic.
fuck. It's terrible. Yes. Yeah, it really is. Very challenging.
If they're trying to create a message of I don't know what exactly, because this purity culture message creates so much harm in the way people are engaging in sex and sexuality as well. That's the thing it's like there's no healthy sexuality being built. So it's like, not only are you teaching this toxic idea about purity culture, but you're not even teaching about what healthy sexuality means. So it's like, don't do this, or this, and this, but like you don't get taught anything. It's like the whole subject's off limits, right? And
right. Mm-hmm.
It's an innate part of being a human being. So how are you supposed to navigate that when you're coming into like puberty and your own sexuality and understanding what it means? It leaves you more vulnerable to harm.
Oh yeah.
And it leaves you more vulnerable to poor self-worth, substance use, depression. That's such a terrible, terrible thing. And I feel like any loving God would not want that. So I don't understand this. Like it just doesn't.
Right. And the world can be pretty cold, pretty nasty, devastating place at times. And so self-pleasure, we see self-soothing, self-pleasure behaviors in babies and toddlers. They don't know anything about sexuality, sex, nothing like that. But it's kind of like a gift that our body has for ourselves to be able to soothe ourselves. And so then we're taught in purity culture, no, 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 until you say these magic words in front of a group of people, and then go for it. And you're just supposed to be able to flip that switch, and sex is going to be magnificent and wonderful. You don't even know your own body. You don't know their body. You have not received any teaching on pleasure, pleasing yourself, pleasing each other. And it's not a fairy tale ending at that point. It's a lot of disappointment and heartbreak for a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely. I've worked with many clients, sadly, that have in that situation. And, I personally know people that wanted to hurry up and get married just so they could have sex, and they were not
Mhm.
a good match in the long run. And it really ended up harming them, and
Yeah.
like I said earlier, putting lives in trajectories that maybe they weren't meant to go in because of
Mhm.
the systems. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it's and the pressure, and I feel like all genders have pressure here, but women, the way that religion, especially the fundamentalism, speaks to women and women's bodies, really, it's disappointing to say the least.
Mhm.
Entrenched
Mhm.
from the beginning of Christianity.
Right. Yeah. When I'm working with um, clients who were assigned female at birth and they grew up in fundy homes, and now they're trying to come to terms with they they have left that belief system, but they may be in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They've never had an orgasm.
Yeah.
Some of them have never had sex, but I mean, even with themselves, they've never been able to
Yeah.
experience that pleasure. And there is a lot of undoing to do as far as the toxic training that they received. And so sometimes I have them just start by reading or watching shows about feminist women, about women who really uh, were confident in themselves and made great contributions to society, even just kind of starting from that emotional distance of a place.
Yes.
I don't right away tell them, well, go get a vibrator and get started, because sometimes that is just too uncomfortable, even for them to think about.
Oh,
Hopefully, we get to that point eventually, but
yeah.
there's so much there.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that you're so right. You can't just all of a sudden undo all of it. Right. So seeing feminist or feminine, people talking about things around women and sexuality, and even just like gauging their own biases, right? Like what's going on inside of them when they're seeing that. Like there's just so much messaging that we receive.
Mhm.
It's I love
Yeah.
that you do it like that. I love it.
Yeah. Getting to a point where we're comfortable with ourselves. So I know I had to, uh, j- I felt like I had to hide that part of me that was attracted to women. I also was attracted to men. And then I married a man who became a pastor, and, we had kids and so forth. But so for that whole duration of that marriage, and even before then, uh, the messaging that I had internalized was it wasn't okay to be myself in that way. I had to just try and forget about that part, even though I knew still that, certain things were very enticing to me and appealing to me, even when I was married to my husband. And it took a long time for me to be able to get to a point where I was free enough and said, you know what? I deserve to explore this part of me, and I want to, and there's nothing wrong with it, and to give myself permission to do that. But it was not an overnight flip of the switch. It took a while to get to that point. And I imagine you have clients like that too. Maybe some who even are just wondering where they fall on the spectrum of sexuality. They'd always been told that they were, they had to be a straight hetero, blah, blah, blah. And now they're going, I'm not even sure if that's actually me. Maybe
Yeah.
that was just what my parents wanted.
Yep. And that's a lot of the work. And I'm happy that you said that, because it shows up in all different ways. The people that want to express themselves and express their gender, the way that their sexual orientation. I mean, there's just so many moving pieces to this. And I do believe that the culprit behind most of this is religion.
Yeah.
I wish I could say differently, but that's just what I see over and over again.
Mhm. Because why should anybody care how anybody else identifies, or whom anybody is attracted to? It really is none of your business. It shouldn't matter. Why can't we just live and let live? The reason we can't is religion. You're exactly right. And then I feel like there can be a lot of fear also For some reason, this particularly seems to show up for a lot of men, but they have such a strong reaction against the idea of same-sex attraction between men, or even bisexuality. And I just think, wow, it's all on a spectrum. We're probably all capable at some point, but it seems so brings up such an aggressive response sometimes.
100%. 100%. And, it's questioning their masculinity or what it means to be a man. And it's incredible what has to be dissected. So, I mean, we're all affected. We're all affected by it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like the generation, so my kids are in their late 20s, they seem so unencumbered compared to my generation. Like if you're gay, if you're bi, whatever it is, okay. Oh, and you're non-binary, okay, that's welcome too. Like let's just let everybody be who they are, and then we don't have to waste time and energy pretending to be something else.
Isn't that amazing? I see that with my nieces and nephews as well. Like they don't give a shit, and why should they? Like you said, but it's just incredible because I noticed that they're also more attuned with things that we were never even allowed to be attuned with. Their mental health, how they're feeling, what, like just the simple how to communicate with each other, even around conversations around sexuality and consent looks really different now for the younger people than it did, when I was around that age. I wouldn't even think, I mean, my nephew was telling me how he wanted to kiss a girl and he needed to ask her consent. And I thought, ask her consent. Usually you just get a vibe and you just kind of, but I'm thinking to myself, wow, you're like really like enthusiastic consent is really an important part of this, and like really caring about how the other person is feeling and not just trying to get some, you know what I mean? Like it was really
it's incredible.
Yeah. So, and that's because we're talking about it. That just goes to show right there. They have access to things. They're talking about things.
Right.
Religion tries to keep a secret.
Yes. And I mean, this is a concern when we see things, feels like things are taking a more puritanical turn in the United States right now, where it's like they're trying to erase that queer people even exist, and especially the trans community is really getting hit hard. And I'm over here in Canada looking at it going, what the heck is going on? And it's concerning because whatever happens over there does end up happening over here to some degree as well. So we really need to be thinking about how can we show our support? How can we be showing up for this community that's really going to need a lot of support in the days to come?
Janice, I do want to share this with you because I think it's really important to hear. I know many people personally and professionally who have safety plans to leave the country because they are scared. They don't, I have a friend of mine I was talking to just the other day. They're sitting down with their trans partner to discuss their plan. When is it time to leave? What are they going to do? They just renewed all their passport. They have all their stuff ready to go. And it almost sounds silly. Like she said it best, she's like, I feel like this is I feel like I'm gaslighting myself with this conversation, she said, that I can't believe that this is where we're at. But the truth is, sadly, it is where we're at. If you really take a careful look at what's happening, the safeties are being dismantled. And
very fast.
Are being very, very fast. And there are a lot of people here that are trying desperately to fight this, but it is not easy to do. It is not easy to do. And so I guess I'm just trying to say, like, the threat is real. Like it's real. Like people are really hurting and they're really scared and they're really impacted.
Yeah.
And they haven't done a thing except live their life.
Right. Right. Yes. I know I get in my DMs, it seems like now at least once a day, somebody, some stranger that I don't know in real life, asking how can they become a Canadian citizen? What would they need to do? And of course, that's not my forte. I did marry an American, like he came from the United States, and it can be very expensive. You have to hire lawyers to get your permanent residency, and it doesn't happen overnight. Now is definitely the time for people to be looking around the world. Where might they be safer? But that's even hard to say. That's even just seems so crazy because the United
I
States
know,
is supposed to be a safe place.
I know. It's shocking, and I think that I just read an article today that most of us are so shocked that we're paralyzed.
Yes.
And I think that that's
Yes.
true because you read, like I'm on here talking, I try to talk, I'm like posting things more. I see my friends and communities posting things more, but the shock and overwhelm, it definitely takes over. It feels like COVID all over again in a weird way. Like you're psychologically impacted the same way.
Yeah, even worse because it feels like there's people gunning for you.
Yes.
It's just and it is you guys especially are being overwhelmed in the United States. He's blasting as much BS out there and trying to keep everybody off balance, but he's also doing it around the world,
Yes, he is.
trying to make everybody feel unsafe because that's what bullies do,
Yes.
and trying to ferret through how much of this. How concerned do Canadians really need to be that he is going to try and annex us? Is he just blowing smoke? Well, I don't think he's just blowing smoke. And so then people are losing sleep and anxiety is high everywhere. It's just oh dear, it's a concerning time.
It is, and I think we just have to keep remembering the truth. Like I try to tell people, I know sometimes you have to turn it off. I get that.
Hmm.
But you can't forget it's there.
Yeah. How do you find that balance? Oh my gosh, it's a tightrope between being overwhelmed and being informed. That is really the situation that a lot of us are facing. And so maybe at this time, it's a time for queer allies to absolutely be stepping up. I know that it's the time for queer allies to be stepping up and saying, we are not going to tolerate this mistreatment of our loved ones and our fellow citizens. It's not acceptable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've had people tell me that are involved in some political stuff out here that if they're a member of the trans community, they would try to get immediately to a safe space. Like there are so many places in this country that are already unsafe, and uh, but I do see a lot of members, even of the trans community in blue states. And I mean, obviously, we know how things can get corrupted, but trying to get their friends and people that they like, just working hard to like try to get them to at least a safer space in the country right now. And that's real. And I want people to know like this, these are human beings.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, and the same thought process was going through my mind when Roe v. Wade was you know demolished and women and girls were being denied their own reproductive sovereignty and access to health care. How can that be? It's like the United States was running, progressing, doing so great, getting so far, and then bang, it's hit a wall. And religion is 100%, and religious fear, people being
Yes.
motivated by that religious fear, that is causing them to act out in these most terrible and unloving, very unchristlike of ways.
Yes. Even the Pope made a statement about how lambasting this administration here.
Yeah.
So it's like more. I would love to see more religious people speaking out because this is not love. This is not Christ-like.
Mhm.
If you forgot what Christ was like, read the Gospels and then come back and tell me if this is Christ.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like there is a mind virus that has taken over among a certain segment. And so a lot of the clients that I see grew up in religious homes and they don't even recognize their parents anymore. Their parents that are in their 70s and 80s and at one time had been very gentle people and now just seem angry and wanting to make people pay and be controlling of other people.
Yes, I don't know what is happening there. 'Cause I do spend, I do have people in my life that have a very different political leanings than myself. And everyone's in an echo chamber over here. And I
Yeah.
think that that's the biggest issue because even, I've had my friends that definitely do not align with this administration say, I bet you people that voted for him are sorry now. No, they're not. They're not sorry. They're happy. Like, you're not in the reality of what's going on with people that are voting for or who voted for this administration. So it's like, I feel like as hard, difficult as it is, we have to see what's going on outside of our own echo chambers. We have to, even if they won't, we need to, so we know how to fight this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the same mentality I had at 18. I need to understand what's happening in here so I know what it is that I need to do to actually fight it with empathy and compassion. It's the same model of thinking.
Yeah, that's why I say you're a powerful example because you were doing this back then, and that's the same attitude, somewhat of humility, maybe, I don't know, that we need to be still bringing forward, still trying to reach across the aisle, even though it's terrifying and frustrating, and just really listening as best we can and keep trying to have positive relationships where we can. So then people, when they're told this lie, all people are this way or all people are that way, they can say, I know that's not true because I know Anne, and Anne isn't that way.
Exactly. Exactly. I've never seen more people vote on southern border immigration in such a vile way that have never been anywhere near the southern border. It's like people don't even know what they don't know. And that's us too. It's all of us. So it's like I think we all need a little humility and a little bit out of our echo chambers and to figure out how to do this because what's happening now is built on fear, just fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear it and I see it. People are deeply afraid of not being able to retire or who's going to take over. I mean, I have a family member who told me that if there were an equal rights was codified in the Constitution here in New York, that Social Security was going to be stopped, given to citizens and given to people that are here illegally. I mean, it doesn't even make sense.
No.
You don't have anyone telling them anything different because no one's engaged with that, right? So it's like we do need to kind of say, okay, well, tell me more about this, or where did you hear that?
Yeah.
Like, explain how this would happen. Like it's not easy conversations. I mean, you're going to get mad. That's just real. You're going to get mad, but that's part of the work, really.
Yeah, and you're also describing the way that we encourage family who have members in cults to be approaching those people. And it is a very culty kind of mindset that has taken over. So what we tell people is, don't attack them. Don't call them names. Tell them they're stupid. Don't tell them their leaders are stupid. Instead, be warm and curious and say, tell me more about that. And when did you start thinking that way? And even, do you remember before you felt that way and we had this beautiful vacation together, like just reminding them there was a time before all this polarization, and then just potentially leaving a door open because please, we hope they come to their senses. You may be the only person in their life that they feel safe, that they can talk to, that they can come out to then when they recognize they were sold a faulty bill of goods.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. 100%. That's the way to do.
Well, tell us how people can find you, and do you have a kind of date in mind for when your book might be ready?
Yes, so I'm turning it into the publisher in July, and it can be within that year. So it's probably about a year or so. But on my website, you can join the subscriber lists, and I'll send you an email for when it's released.
Hmm. And
My
so, how can people find you? What's your website?
AnnRusso.org. Come on over, say hi, send me a message. And if someone is here in Nevada or California and is looking for services, they can go to amrtherapy.com. We do sliding scale, and we specifically cater to marginalized communities. I wish we could be everywhere, or I wish that we had access to know all the people that were doing this work everywhere, because I know there are plenty of people that do, and there's plenty of people that need the support.
Yeah, wow. I've really appreciated connecting with you today. I feel better having talked to you. I hope you do too. And I'll put links in the show notes so people can reach out to you. And thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in today to the Divorcing Religion podcast. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.